Welcome to episode 5 of Tumbando El Sistema, One Talk at a Time. My name is Arlene Castillo, and I will be your host for today. At the time, I would like to introduce each panelist. So we're going to start with Class of 2020. Class of 2020 is Avery, if you could just wave. Joey, and both of their pronouns are he, him, and his. Class of 21 is Giovanni Vargas, he, him, and his. Class of 22, Courtney, she, her, hers. And class of 23, Ray Campbell, he, him, and his. All right, so this session is going to focus on Black Lives Matter. Have any of you guys debated with someone over the Black Lives Matter movement that is currently going on? And can I just get hands up if that's been so?
Absolutely.
So everyone, all right.
Oh, yeah.
So we see that this is a very heated debate, even though it really shouldn't be. But we want to just go over some points to clarify some points of views and things like that. So we're gonna start. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
For me, I would start off by saying it's a slogan, not short of a battle cry almost. Like that's how deep it's become actually. From there, I can just say that it is what it says, Black Lives Matter. But then within that, it's sort of like this tree that like branches off. And from there, you get multiple different facets of how Black lives are not mattering in different areas of economy, agriculture, like social life, mental health. Like there's so many different aspects that are just carried by the umbrella term of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I think when I hear Black Lives Matter, I totally agree with Gio. I think it's a premise by which we should view policy and how to implement and change policy. And so that's when I hear that slogan, Black Lives Matter, I also hear a movement that has swept the 21st century.
Most definitely. And in the context of the US too, I think it's important to realize the history our country has with disenfranchising Black and brown bodies. I mean, slavery is unavoidable, but then you get into Jim Crow laws, you get into a whole lot of segregation when it comes into living, redlining all through the 60s. We have the civil rights movement, we have the death of Emmett Till amidst all of that, and then we have lynchings that are continuing up until today. So we have a history in this country of laws that were developed to be racist that still are out there and still apply, and that legal framework and the way we treat, I think, the authority of our government in our country, if we don't question it and question why laws are what they are, knowing that there are literally hundreds of years of intentional oppression targeted towards Black people, I think that's what encapsulates BLM to me. Just recognizing that in the context of America currently, and it differs in every township, but there are racist laws that were intentionally put there to marginalize Black lives.
Right.
I like the word choice there of recognition versus awareness.
I see a lot of you guys talking about this as a movement, right? But I do want to kind of challenge you guys and ask, is this just a movement or is it also an organization? And do you see it as maybe both? Do you agree with both the organization and the movement? If so,
legally speaking, it is an organization. It's founded by 3 Black women.
Right.
And like 2013.
Right. Exactly. Right after the death of Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
I see it as both. Definitely a movement and an organization. I think if we look at the landscape of how Black Lives Matter got to where it is right now, there was a few years in between 2013 and 2020 where popularity for Black Lives Matter was extremely decreasing due to the lack of awareness and just social acceptance of, police brutality and things of this nature. But as we see Black Lives Matter increasing in popularity, I mean, studies have shown that 50% of voters are actually for the slogan versus in 2013, only 27%. This is like rapidly increasing from even monthly increments from like April to July. And so we see this popularity increasing. And I do believe that it's not just primarily because of the organization. I think it's the slogan has gone beyond the organization. I know people who aren't affiliated with Black Lives Matter, the organization at all, and are like marching down the street saying Black Lives Matter, right? We see places where Black Lives Matter as an organization has no chapter in this place, but yet a Black Lives Matter movement, a protest is happening. And so the movement is metastasized to a way where now it's like out of the hands of the organization, which is a good thing,
Yeah, like I have to agree. It's most definitely both a movement and an organization. And while they're not like mutually exclusive, they're not the same thing together. And, you know, a lot of people do have issues with the organization, but not necessarily the stance that Black Lives Matter because of like certain issues like money and economic issues and how the founders are self-proclaimed Marxists and they, you know, fight for communism and stuff like that. But I mean, it's kind of interesting how it kind of diverged from being one entity into two different like ways to show your support.
Yeah, for me, I definitely see it more as a movement. And not only that, but like I feel like the statement itself to me really just represents like the battle cry, right? Like I feel like it really represents the emotional distraught that everyone who is Black in America or is an ally to Black people in America is going through, right? Because even if you're not going to protest, a lot of people are directly or indirectly supporting, right, taking down systemic racism in America and just supporting Black people in America in general, whether they're in a nonprofit that predominantly supports Black youth, or they're, you know, going to the marches, or they're doing research on racism and how to get rid of it. So for me, I really just see it as that battle cry. And even though there is an organization, I feel like it's just much more than that. And the saying itself is just that rallying cry for all Black people in America and our allies to sort of come together.
Right, and I think you give a really perfect segue into the next question, which is who does the Black Lives Matter movement fight for, right? We've seen a lot of debate that it's only focused on Black people, which is kind of like in the slogan, the point. But do you think that it includes everyone past Black people? Do you feel like it should include more people, or how are you guys feeling about who and what the Black Lives Matter movement fights for?
I would equate it to feminism in terms of just fighting for equality and standards. I know that feminism, again, women, Black Lives Matter, Black people, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like there's that quote that's been going around a lot. It's like, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? That's the overarching theme here, is inclusion. And in response to like all lives matter, like all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. So I think at its core, it really is for equality and for everyone.
I want to I want to just go back for a second to the last question, and I want to just add, if there's any conservatives watching, I wanted to just specifically say to them that if you cannot separate between Black Lives Matter, the movement, versus the organization, you do not need to wear Nike anymore, because Nike has a slogan that says "Just do it," and every time I say "Just do it," I don't have to pay Nike. So at some point, you need to have enough intellectual prowess to say, hey, you know, there's a difference between Black Lives Matter, the phrase, versus Black Lives Matter, the organization. Granted, they might have issues with money and things of that nature, and, you know, who they represent might be in question and all that other stuff. But Black Lives Matter should be a mantra that anyone is okay with. So I just wanted to add that.
I think that's a very good point. Even in politics, like sometimes we don't know how to separate like something for a cause and the person or things like that. So yeah. But does anybody want to answer, like give any feedback to that before we move on?
Hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I think Ray said something along the lines of earlier, like they coexist, but not in a vacuum.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's some overlap. However, it's not the same.
Right. And I think a tactic that has been against the movement has been the founders are Marxists, which is like utterly foolish, because, you know, it's just utterly foolish for multiple reasons. But besides that, putting that aside, the literal Black Lives Matter mantra should be okay with you. Yeah.
So, you're saying that people are saying that it's for Marxists, and in that same frame of line, people are saying that it's only for Black people, and Gio just gave us the explanation that, it's actually for everybody. So why don't we use All Lives Matter? Like, why can't that be our slogan, if that phrase seems to be for all lives, right?
I was gonna say, for me, I feel like it's not the right thing for a couple of reasons. I think one reason is, yes, while Black Lives Matter does, I think, inadvertently sort of support all other people of color and other marginalized communities in America through the movement really is to call specific attention to Black people in America, right? Because it goes way back. Racism, not to say there isn't a lot of other, historical oppression to other groups, but with Black people, it's very, very, it's very there because of racism, right? But so in saying all lives matter, you're completely dismissing that factor, right? And on top of that, I think the other issue with all lives matter is it's the easy way out. It's very easy to say all lives matter, but unless you can say to me, all of the different systemic issues affecting, every racial, ethnic group in America, then you shouldn't say all lives matter, right? Because in you saying all lives matter, that means you don't understand the depth of the issues for all these different communities. So I know I myself definitely cannot state every single, systemic issue within those communities. So for me, those are the two main reasons why saying all lives matter just is not the right way.
Good.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. One thing I will definitely want to add, the thing that I dislike the most about the phrase all lives matter is that it was responsive. It was a response. It was not an original thought. It was a response to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And if your response to anything, when someone calls attention to a specific issue that is hitting one specific group harder than it's hitting others, is, well, what about everyone else? You don't care about everyone else. You're not listening to the issue. And I think that's what's so frustrating, is you have so many people who are not seeking to understand before they seek to make their own beliefs understood. They're faced with something that, for whatever reason, is not something that they had a dialogue with among other people or internally. And it just seems like almost a wounded response, and that is just so frustrating for me, because instead of opening it up and trying to understand where they're coming from and understand why people are so frustrated and so heated right now and emotions are so high, the conversation is just shut down with a responsive phrase that is not, again, an original thought, and again is ignoring the issue.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that we were having this panel today, and there was a meme of some sort going around about this young boy named Cannon. I don't know if anybody saw it yet, who was brutally murdered in front of another man's home. Cannon was like 8, I believe. I know I'm botching the fact pattern, but All Lives Matter jumped to the scene. Where is the hashtag for Cannon, this young white boy, which it was a tragedy, don't get me wrong, completely. But I bet you, which in a matter of 24 hours, his perpetrator was captured immediately, arrested. And they're going to process him, and I promise you, it will be to the fullest extent of the law. This is just a simple notion of the difference. All Lives Matter doesn't speak to the disparity. Like, we know for a fact that Cannon's going to get justice, but Breonna Taylor hasn't yet. So this is one of the major differences of All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. I'm not just going to go into my home when my wife says I love you and say, well, I love every woman. There has to be a way where we can actually get an intellectual sense about this All Lives versus Black Lives Matter thing.
And I think to add on to that, it's more so used as a way to deflect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how many people actually understand what they're trying to say when they say all lives matter? Probably not many. That is my personal opinion. When I think of it, it's sort of like a roadmap of your mind. You know what I mean? All of us have this path that we're taking that guides us. This is our right train of thought, because we all want to be the good guy, right? Everybody wants to do the right thing in their mind. And so when you have this map drawn out, you're like, all right, this is the way. This is the way I'm going. This is the path I've been on for a long time. And someone says, you're going the wrong way. After all that time on that road, you're going to turn around and be like, all right, let me fix this. No, you're going to be like, no, I'm right. I spent my entire life on this map. And I think that's what it comes down to is I'm scared to be wrong. I'm scared because I don't want to be the bad guy.
That's good. That's good. Almost like a fragility of some sort. Like America doesn't want to admit her wrongs. That's good.
Right. And that word we're gonna get to soon, actually, talking about white fragility, which will be a topic to come up. So hold that thought, Gio. But I actually want to talk for Avery's comment that I was reading today that the man got arrested in an hour from finding out like everything. And I think you brought up a really good point with Breonna Taylor, which leads me to my next question. I don't know if this is the best way to phrase this, but is anyone being left out from the attention given to the Black Lives Matter movement? And not so much that the Black Lives Matter movement is not fighting for these people, but are we giving them enough attention when we talk about Black Lives Matter? And if so, like, who is not being given that attention?
Well, in society, we have a default, right? When we talk about race and ethnicity, the default is white. When we talk about gender, right, the default is male. And when we talk about sexuality, the default is heterosexual. So when we're looking at the Black Lives Matter, when we say Black, the default is a Black heterosexual cisgender male. So basically everyone outside of that category, I would say, is being left out. And it's not intentional, even though in some spaces, right, I'm sure some of us have had conversations where people might have directed it the other way. And I know I myself, with other Black females, have had conversations where they said, well, doesn't it affect Black males more? And I think the issue is in a lot of the narratives, when we do look at the systemic issues that affect Black people in America, we tend to only look at Black cisgender heterosexual males, right? And there's also a huge lack in research looking at other groups. Like I'm doing a lot of research on the school system, and there's barely any research, right, on Black females. Better yet, when you get into trans females and then you get into, any other sexuality besides heterosexuality, right? So when you just think of it from that perspective, there's definitely a lot of people that are being left out from the Black Lives Matter movement that we need to call attention to and start looking at it from a more intersectional lens.
I don't know if the Joey, did you have something before?
I was just affirming.
Yeah, I don't know if I think when we're looking at like the Black Lives Matter movement, one of the things that I was thinking, even doing my own research, I saw some critiques regarding because Black Lives Matter has now become an international movement. I mean, there's chapters in the UK. I mean, there's chapters really all over. I mean, London had one of its biggest protests ever in history because of the Black Lives Matter movement. And one of the things I was observing is one of the critiques was, well, Black Lives Matter isn't marching for the Black people who are currently during the pandemic, being kicked out of their homes in China and forced to live on the streets. I don't know if you all have been following what's going on in China with Black Muslims. It's terrible. It's awful. But I feel like what we do is a lot of times we put too much weight on these movements and not remind ourselves that it's an individual work. These movements are just comprised of individuals. It's your responsibility to raise your voice and speak out against injustice. And by no means am I saying that Black Lives Matter isn't, a perpetrator of exclusivity. That's not what I'm saying. However, I am saying let's not miss where our responsibility lies. It's our individual responsibility as citizens of a global context to speak out against injustice. And it's not just an organization or a chapter near you that's supposed to speak out against it. It's all of us.
Most definitely. And one thing I will add, to go outside of the scope of Black Lives Matter, I remember a couple of months ago, anti-Semitism, there was an issue with a professional football player posting a quote about an anti-Semitic quote. And the thing that was interesting, a quote that I really liked from all of that was from another football player calling issue to the anti-Semitism and saying, I understand the current state of our nation. Don't get us wrong. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Right. So let's not get it confused. Black Lives Matter is not going to take issue with something such as the Young Boys Death in Canon because it's similar enough. Like IKEA isn't going to start selling cars because it's similar to furniture. You know, so you can have this intersectional activism, and a lot of people who are pro Black Lives Matter are also pro LGBTQIA rights. It's different areas where this stuff comes up. So I just want to be very clear that Black Lives Matter isn't by any means preventing any of its supporters from being an intersectional activist.
Right. And I wonder, what is it in America that makes us so uncomfortable when focusing on Black lives? I mean, is that really an issue that, you know, Black Lives Matter is not focused on necessarily another form of oppression, even though it's there? You know, hopefully another organization takes that cause. But why is America so almost afraid to focus and hone in on its original sin, which is what they have done to African American people in this nation? I don't understand that.
Anybody want to take a stab at that?
White fragility, but we have plenty of that for later.
Yeah. How about that?
I see your thinking face, Ray.
Well, I wanted to, like, do you mean other issues outside of Black people, or like
exactly
Black people?
Exactly. So for example, they say, well, Black Lives Matter, one of the critiques that I've been reading was that they only focus on Black lives. Well, it is called Black Lives Matter. Like, you know, I mean, it's in the name, but why is that a problem? It shouldn't be, because I mean, in this nation, Black lives have had a very particular kind of oppression that deserves sole attention.
He's bringing up a great point in terms of how this movement has been responded to in general, and how this train of thought has been responded to in general. It's deflect at all costs.
Yeah, that's good.
Neglect it. Put it, compartmentalize. Like, do not think about this at all.
So I guess I want to challenge you guys, because Avery, you know, you phrased a good question, but I just like Ray, I was a little confused at first. Do you guys feel like the Black Lives Matter movement is taking on too many roles? Like, are they focusing, like, should they just focus on Black lives and then not focus on trans, on gender equality, on whatever else that could fall under that? Is that what I'm getting here, or is that not what I'm getting here?
Personally, I think when we look at like race and ethnicity, when we look at those systems in America, I think if you help Black people, I feel like inadvertently, all of those other racial ethnic groups will be helped, right? However, when you look at gender identity and like sexual identity issues, I do think they are left out, right? Because I mentioned the default before. So I think within the Black Lives Matter movement, I do not think you need to focus on other racial ethnic groups, because I think inadvertently they will be systemically helped when we fix those racist policies, right? However, I do think we need to make sure we're being very intersectional when we're looking at gender and sexual identity, sexual like orientation issues, right? So that's my take on it.
I agree.
I'd also like to go back to that first question that you asked of, well, is it for everyone or is it for Black people? And I think that's what we're getting back to, sort of.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that by focusing on the Black experience, which is the most, how would you say, hidden, the most neglected experience of our American peoples, we are helping everyone.
Yeah.
It is a vehicle to help everyone else.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You know, politicians, I'm sorry, Arlene, politicians say all the time, a rising tide rises all ships. Well, Black ships have holes in them, and we don't have sails, and I don't think there's a lot of life vests on them. And that is due to a history in this nation that many other ships in the sea don't necessarily have. And so I do think it brings credence to actually deal solely with Black lives in that regard.
So I want to kind of move us along a little bit. We're saying that, people are not as understanding that Black Lives Matter is really for everyone. It's not just like it's for Black lives, but it will help everyone in the long run. Could that be a reason why the movement has gotten so much attention now? Or do you think that is for other reasons that the movement right now is like, I don't want to say blowing up, but it feels like everyone's talking about it, everyone knows about it, and we're finally like putting our eyes on it?
I think the weirdest thing for me was that everything really changed with the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And I was honestly shocked that it wasn't the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, because that was just horrific. To be hunted down by other civilians on a jog, like that's terroristic.
Yeah.
But to have the police so obviously doing what they did, I think that was what it was. Is you have people there who are saying, "Stop. We've had enough. This is not going to happen again," and it happens again. And then the thing that really I think carried the movement on is all these demonstrations afterwards. Even peaceful protests are being met with violence and rubber bullets, and these are the cops on their best behavior. So now we're seeing just this outlandish response to people raising valid concerns over an undoubted murder,
Mm-hmm.
and people are just shell shocked. I think that is what catapulted it. And before, I mean, in 2016, I remember when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, and a bunch of Lehigh students, about 30 of us or so, took a knee at the Lee Loft game. And we had like a small news crew there, but no one was giving us any credence. And now Kaepernick's out of the league, and he still hasn't gotten a formal apology. People were mad about him taking a knee, and now they're mad about people getting very upset because murders are continuing. It's just it's almost like people have been trying to warn us, and now we're seeing what they're warning us about in vivid detail on video. And I think that the imagery is just really, really frustrating a lot of people who have been talking about this since the inception of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
I think I want to jump off of that imagery section of that. The George Floyd video was touted around as a lot of people, not my word, as murder porn. And people watched it over and over and over again as irrefutable evidence. It was raw, it was vivid, and it's going to stick with you for the rest of your life if you've watched that video.
Yeah.
And still to hear challenges to the thought that maybe that person was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. The social media is a part of it.
Yeah.
But I would also like to build on the fact that now that it's become a more global thing, companies are like, okay, we have to switch, because if not, we're not making our bottom dollar. And now that companies are on board, now that sports are on board, everyone's like, oh, cool, tight, like we're with the Black Lives Matter. It's cool now, like it's a trend.
Yeah.
Like all the companies are sort of switching over. And if not, you're losing business.
Yeah.
So there's different areas, different sectors that are definitely influencing and also now probably benefiting from Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's a rebuke to the nation. A rebuke is, why wasn't it as popular when Trayvon died? Why did it keep taking blood to buy our popularity now? You know what I'm saying? Like, why didn't we act sooner to prevent a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor or a Sandra Bland, and the list goes on? You know, like, why did this not happen? And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to take it a step further. It's not just police killings, right? Systemic racism in America causes, a lifespan shortage in Black people. Our lifespan isn't as long. There's a lot of health disparities. Black women are over like 200% more likely to die in childbirth, right? And this isn't due to someone pulling a trigger or you know, like this is due to a lot of issues. Some just as simple as facing multiple microaggressions a day, right? That creates a lot of stress, so much stress that it impacts your immune system, and then it leads to a lot of other issues, right? And there's so many like other things, like even looking at COVID, right? The disproportionate amount of Black people dying of COVID, right? That didn't spike a Black Lives Matter movement. So I think a lot of it is we want to look at the things that are more visible and things that are hard to dispute, right? George Floyd was hard to dispute. Trayvon Martin, even though I don't think that was hard to dispute, somehow they found every little thing in the book, right? To find it disputable. So I think it's just we want to get things that are, I don't want to say easy to swallow, but just easier to accept as racist. We don't want to accept that Black women die in childbirth more due to racism, right? Whether it's implicit, explicit, whatever, right? We don't want to accept that. We don't want to talk about those issues because they're harder to swallow, that the everyday person is doing racist acts that lead to deaths of Black people at disproportionate rates.
That's good.
Oh, yeah. I just saw a tweet from Neil deGrasse Tyson about how his own father was experiencing medical racism. He, I think, had just had a stroke or a heart attack and was in a care unit. And he noticed that the doctors weren't really like giving him as much attention as he felt he needed. So he put up a photo of his dad giving a speech for his honorary doctorate degree, and he noticed that the care changed immediately.
Wow.
That is something that is very hard to measure, to Courtney's point. It's not clear cut and dry. You can't, there aren't metrics on how a hospital will treat people differently.
Yeah.
But on top of that, it's the stuff that's hard to see is like food deserts and urban planning.
Yeah.
We literally trap people in 4x4 blocks with highways, lack of public transportation, and then we wonder why they're still living in the same neighborhood when they're 70 or 80. How are they going to get out if there are no jobs around them? They can't physically leave without getting hit by a car.
Oh yeah.
Right. It sounds like we're frustrated because people are not America. Let's say North America has not been listening and it's not listening. We have evidence now, right? Of something that's so hard to have evidence for. And I want to take that a little bit further right now. That frustration is probably what a lot of people felt going into the protest and why they went into the protest. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you guys, kind of give an explanation of maybe why these protests became so big now. Like, why do you think they were such a powerful movement and they took so much media attention this time? And why we actually went out, like we went all out this time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think a part of the protest that was powerful was that it wasn't just Black folk, which I have to give kudos to our allied brothers and sisters. That there was a poll in the New York Times regarding the protests, and they were saying that that there was a dramatic increase in white counties of Black Lives Matter protests. A dramatic increase. I mean, counties that have never seen Black Lives Matter before ever are having protests in majority white counties. That's incredible. And I think that, and also I think the nation began to almost have deja vu of a time where this has happened before. If you saw on the news and if you participated in some of the protests, it almost felt like we were doing what our grandfathers and grandmothers talked about. My grandmother and grandfather talked about a time where they had to, be marching and protesting and not know how dangerous it is due to people, driving their cars into protesters, actively, violently doing anything. We were experiencing that. And that I think triggered a nation into almost having a deja vu moment, like we're back here again.
Any other thoughts?
To your point of the frustration, there was a lot of pointing fingers at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think now we've sort of all come together and said, hey, social media isn't everything. If you didn't post about Black Lives Matter, you're okay. Like, it's not the end of the world. Like, that's not something that you can judge or measure through social media. That's not the end all be all. But at the beginning, there was definitely a pressure for slacktivism and all these people taking pictures congrats, like, wow, but they're not going to be with you when push comes to shove.
Yeah.
But also, for a lot of us, it was a way to vent that frustration that you mentioned earlier. Because it was like, what can I do? Where can we go? We didn't have the sources yet. Like, a lot of the sources and a lot of the movement, a lot of the data, a lot of the information that came from the hashtag, that came from the post. I have learned more about Black Lives Matter in the last couple of months than I ever have in my life. I did not know a Seneca Village existed. I didn't know that there was a beautiful Black economy in Tulsa that was ripped to shreds.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't know these things. But who was going to teach me?
Right.
Well, I think like backing up what you guys are saying, you're right. It was a way for us to be able to let out that frustration, somewhere to go. And we also had that pressure in social media. But I also want to kind of talk about something that we don't always like to talk about, which is the looting that was talked about a lot in the protest.
Oh, we love it. We could talk about it. We're ready for that.
And I just want to hear your opinions on, like, should we even be concerned about that, right? Is it important for us to talk about that? Is that contradictory, if that's a word, to the movement? What do you guys think?
I wrote a little spiel about this. I would love to bring about Kimberly Jones. I don't know if you guys have seen this, the author of I'm Not Dying with You Tonight. I'm Not Dying with You Tonight. Apologies. I'm reading from my notes. Since there's three people out there. There's the protesters that care, the rioters that are angry and are just going there to F things up. Like that's what they're there to do. And the looters who are just going to loot.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the focus is, look at what you're doing. But has anybody stopped and asked why? And she goes on to say, because that's how hopeless people are. That's the situation that they've been put in, that they're going to take this moment that could benefit everyone to say, all right, this is my time. This is the only time I will ever get a Gucci bag. This is the only time I could ever steal a TV.
Yeah.
Like, why are people that broke in the first place? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not the looting that matters. It's the why behind the looting. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's very powerful, actually. Like, why in the first place? We don't talk about that.
It's the 400 years of economic suppression, the redlining, eminent domain, gerrymandering, mass incarceration, slavery, Rosewood, Seneca Village, stop and frisk. Like, it's all these things.
Yeah.
And you want to ask why? You just point fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going to that point, there's a reason why the media only focused on looting. They weren't spitting out statistics. They weren't pointing out more racist incidents, because we all know that racism didn't just stop during the looting, and there was no other. I'm sure there was tons of, I don't even want to think of what happened that isn't covered on the media. Like, there's so many things happening that we can't even fathom, whether it's actual, I don't want to say actual, but like large scale events or just small incidents, right? But they chose to focus on looting, and they chose to talk about Black Lives Matter in a negative light on purpose. And they do this with multiple things, right? When we look at people who have been killed by police, they choose to criminalize them. Like, Black people are criminalized in America, and the narratives are criminalized, and they dehumanize their deaths, right? And with George Floyd, they did that. With nameless other people, they have done that, right? With the Black community in general, they do that. Even with COVID, their reasoning behind Black people dying at disproportionate rates is that we weren't wearing masks enough.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's not the reason.
And even if so, why don't you have masks?
Exactly.
So the other thing that I think was really hard for me to understand is a lot of feedback that I got from people was, oh, well, I don't want to stand with Black Lives Matter if there's all this violent looting. And I just kind of had to sit there for a second and think, are we really going to place property on this pedestal? And yeah, of course, let's recognize the impact. Were there Black businesses hurt? Yeah. Were there white businesses hurt? Yeah. We're not saying that it's it's good in any way. We're not trying to bend the laws around it. You know, people were prosecuted and have been prosecuted. I struggle though to understand how we come to a place where there is a group of people who is actively saying, I can't support Black Lives Matter because they broke some goods. And that's the whole thing. Like what Gio's saying, there are so many forces behind it. Like, why is it happening? Why did we come to this place? Why are we even having riots in the first place? Why do people feel pushed to do this? We had so many different people in so many different places, whether you look at professional sports or high places in companies that were speaking out against this before, and now this is what it really is. You know, why is it happening? That why is really important, and you can't write something off because of property damage. It wasn't like it was a mass murder of policemen. The only policeman that died during the raiding was killed by another policeman who thought that policeman was breaking into his house. So let's get it straight, you know. These are people's lives. They're not property. Let's not go back down that. That is exactly what happened way back when with slavery. We're not doing that anymore. Yeah. People's lives matter more than damaged property.
I was gonna say, I wasn't laughing at what you were saying, Joe. Everything you were saying was spot on. I just had to laugh at the audacity of the statement of I can't stand by it because of looting. Let's talk about the rape, the murder, you know, slavery. We still have slavery. We have the 13th Amendment, and people stand by America, right? After everything that's been done to Black people with slavery and other communities, that's why you don't stand by Black Lives Matter. But the rape and the murder of our people for years, you know? So I'm sorry.
No, I want to intersect real quick. Just because of time, I do want to get a little bit deeper into, which we're already in track there, but I really want to get us there, is what Black Lives Matter movement is. One of its main goals, which is to defund the police, right? And I want to hear what you guys have to say on that. What does that mean? What does defunding the police mean?
I have a perfect segue. Perfect segue.
All right.
So I was just going to finish off that last one by saying, but also, how do you get to say that the looting is related to Black Lives Matter? Right. Because as we saw in the news, there was a police officer who was tried and found guilty of arson.
Yeah. I mean, that looting one had us for a second. My God.
Yeah.
Looting is the language of the unheard. That's all I'm going to say. Looting is the language of the unheard. You don't hear us when we've taken a knee, and now you're mad because we're throwing stuff. Okay. Defund the police. We defund schools all the time. America is known for defunding their education all the time, to expand their military prowess and any other thing they deem worthy besides our children's education. When we mean defund the police, I really believe that we are discussing reimagining what policing looks like in the American context. If you look at our inner cities, if you look at our communities, and I want to say any inner cities with a caveat that inner city doesn't always equal Black, right? I think that on Fox News, they mix that up a lot. But if you look at just our communities where predominantly African Americans and Black people, brown people reside, they're over-policed and underfunded. And so you want crime to stop with more police bodies present, but you don't want to deal with the symptom of the crime, with the actual disease, of the crime, which is a lack of education, a lack of opportunity, a lack of jobs, a lack of after-school programming. With this administration in particular has done everything they can to eliminate. Just a lack of school vouchers, things of this nature that aid the advancement of Black and brown people. And so you wonder why we're trying to defund the police, because we're trying to put that money in better places. In better places, you're not using it except to get more guns. So that's all I want to say.
Reimagine and reallocate.
Yeah, reallocate. Yeah, let's do it. Let's defund a military power. And we know studies have shown, sociology, psychology has shown us that communities that are over-policed feel like they're in war. They feel threatened. They feel as if there is a power overtaking their authority in their own communities. And we want to give our communities back their say. And so that's what I hear when I hear defund the police.
And to add on to that, it doesn't work. It does not reduce recidivism. It literally does nothing but create more crime. That's all it does. And when you look at the school to prison pipeline, right, when we send these kids for minor offenses like truancy, smoking weed, whatever, right, and then we send them into the juvenile justice system, that basically is handing them a life sentence into prison. That's all it does when you look at the statistics. And all it does is make better criminals, right, because then they go in there for minor offenses, right, or maybe it was a major offense, and all you do is learn how to do it better because you're in there with people that know how to do it, and that's what ends up happening. And not just because they go in there wanting to do that, but they're left with no choice because you basically put a stamp on these people, and they literally can do nothing else. You can't get a job, you can't go to school, you can't do anything except keep doing what you were doing in the first place. And then when you look outside of that, why were some people doing those illegal like activities in the first place, right? There's a lot of systemic issues even causing people to turn to those certain activities, right? So when we say defund, like going like back to what Avery said, it just simply means we need to put funds in other places, right? Like why are people even committing crimes in the first place, right? And then on top of that, why are we punishing them the way we're punishing them if it's not doing anything? It literally does nothing at all but, you know, create the cycle. And then like I said earlier, 13th Amendment, slavery is still legal in America if you go to jail. So really the only reason mass incarceration, like the prison industrial complex started, right, creating mass incarceration was because of the 13th Amendment and to keep slavery going, right? And that's all I'm gonna say because I can just keep going and going and going.
Yeah. I would like to share a story actually about my time at Lehigh as an RA, and I'll keep it really brief. I found a kid passed out, drunk, non-responsive. I call the police, as I'm told to do, and 3 men with handguns show up to try and fix the situation. Tell me how that makes any sense. We have EMTs, we have medical students, we have pre-med students, but 3 dudes with handguns who are just going to breathalyze this kid and then tell me, no, don't call an ambulance until we get there because we know when you need an ambulance. I'm sorry, if someone can't wake up, reeks of alcohol, and vomits on the floor, I'm not just going to sit there. So when we're talking about defunding, I'd like to think of it as refunding the community, right? Because what if instead of 3 police officers who, again, are ready to respond to a violent crime, we have health professionals showing up on the scene? What if I can find a friend who then can, you know, put me in contact with a healthcare provider? What if there's a counselor on call? What if there are community officers who don't have a weapon and their job isn't crime enforcement? Their job is to just befriend community members and understand what's going on. Restructuring the policing system to look more like the suburbs where you don't see police cars cruising around and you have people who live where they're policing and live in the area that they're in charge of. That's what it's all about. It's just making it more of a community focused thing and not some like big, bad, awful punisher, because that's not what communities need. No community needs someone telling everyone what to do.
And what if you went back to that and you were just like, wait, what if none of that was necessary because you were educated on it?
Right.
So I want to challenge you guys. Are there no good cops? Is that what we're saying? Does that even matter? Like, should we not think about the good cops out there?
There are great McDonald's workers, but the food they give me is still unhealthy. I don't oppose the worker as much as I oppose the actual system. So, you know, I think it's a frivolous argument. Well, there's some good cops. Yeah, well, there's some good anything. And I just want to say to that point, the media has a bent on cops. The media looks at cops, and I hear this rhetoric all the time. They say things like, well, you know, 99% of our cops are good. There's only 1% of a cop, you know, there's only one bad out. The truth is 100% of our cops are human, and they are all susceptible to human error. And that's what we see in many of these cases. And I think that's the point that we need to get at. They're all susceptible to error, to prejudice, to bias. They're all human. And so this good cop, bad cop thing misses me many times.
Yeah, and to add on to that, emphasizing the system, right? It's not the individuals that are the issue, it's the system, right? Why were police created in the first place, right? Where did they originate from? Slave catchers, so just looking at the history of the police, that's the issue. And taking it a step further, like when we talk about racism in America, it's not the Karens, right? It's not Karens. It's not the individuals, it's the systems of racism in America, right? And our education system, and the media and all of these other things that are perpetuating and socializing these racist ideas into people's minds that keep it going in America. Like, why do we keep having racists? There's not just some secret, racist, how to be a racist club that everyone's joining to become a racist. That's not what's happening, right?
That's called the American school system.
Right?
Yeah, I can't with you. All right. Well.
And to just add to the system, in all police departments, there's something called qualified immunity and indemnification. When police do something wrong, they are covered. If they kill people, they are covered. They have their own internal review board, and they are the same buddies that go out for drinks after a shift. The system is wrecked. And I'm not saying that, the police are bad, but I am saying, like my sister Courtney said, we have to change the system. I want a police officer to be afraid to kill somebody because if they do, they might lose the rest of their pension. That's what we want. You and I have that fear. We have that fear that if we do something on our job is done and we're done for and we'll have to go on unemployment, which we see right now how fragile that is. You know what I'm saying? I want that same type of fear in our police departments.
Yeah, I most definitely have to agree. A lot of people differentiate morals versus the job that they sign up for. To police, it's essentially, I was watching a video on Twitter from a talk show, and it was a bunch of former NYPD police officers, and they were talking about how they have arrest and ticket quotas that they have to meet a certain amount of arrests and give out a certain amount of tickets, and they usually target Black people, brown people, minorities, because most of the time we don't really know what's within the law and how it can oftentimes affect us. And you also have, it's not just only police, it's the entire criminal justice system, from police to judges to prisons. Prisons have stocks, prisons are privatized. Every time someone goes to jail, you get paid, someone gets paid for it. So essentially it's the whole system. It doesn't matter if your cop is a nice person or racist or whatever, it's the whole system is against Black people.
Yes.
So I want to actually transition with that. You're saying that, the system is against Black people, but what about Black on Black crime? We keep hearing this term, Black on Black crime, and that's the reason why we need to keep our police system. I don't want to say police system, but the system, you know what I mean? Yeah. So what do y'all think about that? Is Black on Black crime a good defense to these arguments?
I think it's just another deflection, kind of like a all lives matter deflection, because when you look at certain statistics, Black on Black crime is pretty similar to with every race. In every race, you'll generally have people in the same communities kill people in the same communities. So white on white crime is literally the same. Hispanic on Hispanic crime, it doesn't really matter. It's not a valid thing to say when you talk about defunding the police and things of that nature.
Yeah, it's a myth. They made it up. Yeah. It's not a thing. No one, that literally was made up literally just to continue criminalizing Black people and say, hey, who cares if we kill them? They kill themselves. They're doing it to themselves, right? Because all of the blame is put on to the Black community. And you said it, right? It's similar because, it's the same. It's just crime. If you live in that community, you're not going to, if you're a serial killer, you're not going to run into, okay, well, that's a bad example. You might run into a different community, right? But even with serial killers, though, they found statistically they're more likely to kill within their same racial ethnic group, right? So they're, even with serial killers, right, they're killing within their same racial ethnic group. And it goes for all crimes because you're in that same community with the same people, right? You're not going out of your way to target, that's not how crime works. I'm sure some individuals do that, but that's not how it works. It's just crime. So when they say black and black crime, all they're doing is trying to criminalize black people. That's literally the only reason in using that term. So if someone even says black and black crime, all you're doing is being racist. You're using racist rhetoric that was used to distract from the issues of, disproportionate killings of black people.
Well said, Courtney.
And let's get this straight too. No man, woman, or other has woken up. For example, no white man has ever gone and said, you know what, I'm going to kill this man because he's white. No black individual is waking up and I'm going to kill this man because he's black. No one's going to rob a house, see a family portrait, and be like, oh, this is a white house? Well, I'm going to put everything back. And then, oh, it's a black family portrait? Well, now I'm going to rob them. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
It is community proximity, and that's all there is to it.
Yes.
I'd also like to build on that with, thank you, with the, going back to Kimberly Jones and how she said something along the lines of, if I play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds, I don't let you have property or your own money or any of your own stores.
Good.
And then after that, I tell you, catch up, what are you doing? You're going to see that these people have everything. You're going to see that they're not focused on surviving like us. They're thriving. And that, like, from personal experience, like, I come from a very urban community, like a very deadly, like, fatal community, and, like, to learn what the difference is between learning how to survive, what hot water is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, are they asking, again, it comes back to that question, like, why? Even if there was black on black crime and it was this crazy thing, why would you do that? Because where are these resources?
Yeah. And I just want to add to, in the context of black on black crime, in relation to it being a rebuttal against the idea of anything else is wrong. It's completely wrong. However, I do want to stress to every black person that is watching us right now that we do have to deal with crime in our communities. That's not up for debate, right? I mean, crime in our communities is a problem, just like it is in every other problem. But I believe ours, a part of it stems from a self-hatred and a self-conditioning due to many years of disenfranchisement and many other things. And because of that, I would say that we ourselves, I mean, for in Atlanta, an 8-year-old girl gets shot by gun violence, things of that nature. I mean, of course, there are institutions right now that are fighting against gun violence in our cities, primarily minority cities and things of that nature. But we do have to deal with black on black crime outside of the context of whether or not it can be used as a tool against, to defund the police and all that other stuff. But it is something that we do have to consider.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is, like, in general, we need to better our, communities, right? Because, like I was saying earlier, why are they committing crimes in the first place, right?
Yep.
Why are they doing it? Is it because they need to feed their family? Why aren't they going to school to start, right? Is it because their teachers are racist, so they don't go to school because they keep getting suspended? So now they can't go to school. School isn't an option, or they're choosing other options because they need to feed their family, right? And then when we get into violence, we need to look at all of the trauma that has been put into the Black community historically. There's just so many factors going into that. And like you said, internalized racism, we have a lot of things within the Black community. And I think the big issue is the lack of education, right? We're not educated. I would say we're not educated about America's history. We're educated about a biased, skewed positive reflection of white Americans, right? That's the history that we're given. We're not giving the true history of America. And as Black individuals, we go to those same schools. So we're not getting our history, right? We're not getting the Black American history. And I think a big thing is we need to educate our own, individuals in our own communities. Because I know I didn't understand what Black Lives Matter meant when I was, even in 9th grade, because I just was never taught it. I didn't know what it meant until I got older and I took it upon myself to do more research, right? So I think we need to educate ourselves and then find ways to help ourselves, right? In addition to gathering allies who can also help us, because we definitely can't do it alone.
And that builds on the inability to call on a pool of knowledge.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's pretty much all I want to say about that. But the how, we're asking why, but how? How do we get better? How do we improve our communities? There is no blueprint for us.
And I think, for the sake of time, I love your responses. And, I will say the one thing that I am really taking from this is that we need to, instead of keep adding things to try to fix the problem, we need to just go back and fix the problem from the beginning. We need to like shift the whole system. We can't just add to the system and expect it to change, right? And then that's, you know, like Courtney was saying, I forgot my connection. But I want to talk more now about what can we do now that the Black Lives Matter movement seems to be kind of dying down in our social medias, right? We're not seeing it as much. We're not seeing it in the news as much, even though we still should, because there's still protests going on. There's still things going on in this world. But we also want to do more than just watch, right? We don't want to just keep watching killings and expect our minds to get better. So a question that I do have for you guys is, why are white people necessary for the Black Lives Matter movement, right? That's a question. First question right now.
One thing that I will say to start this off, for me personally, if you look at where we are, going back to what Gio said, the Kimberly Jones quote about the game of Monopoly, understanding that like 90% of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies are white, understanding that 90% of executives in these companies are white, and understanding that we are in a capitalist country where everything revolves around money. What Courtney was saying about self-educating and going about it applies just as much to non-Black individuals, and it is arguably more important because we want equality, but we need equity to reach the equality. And there's no way you're going to know. Like the only reason I think that I've been able to be a good resource to the people around me is because I was an Africana Studies minor in college, and I graduated with that, right? So I spent 4 years, literally 4 years, learning about systemic racism throughout the country and throughout the African diaspora. Not everyone has had that experience. No school is going to give you that unless you seek it out actively. You have to do the research to understand the context, seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. I can understand seeing this stuff, and if you've never had a dialogue about race in your life, being perplexed, right, or getting frustrated, but you have to push past it. You just have to. It's not debatable. It's one of those things where so many systems have put white people in places of power. The white people in those places of power need to be cognizant of how those systems benefited them. No one's saying your life isn't hard. Just recognize all these forces that are helping you while actively pushing down Black and brown bodies. And I think that's a really, really important thing that often gets overlooked on the ally side.
Yeah.
I want to also ask something else now that we're in this frame of mindset. Gio, this is your time to shine right now. Is white fragility, which we will define as feelings of discomfort a white person experiences when they witness discussions around racial inequality and injustice, something we should consider when talking to or confronting white people about racism?
I might get some hate, but I think it is something you should consider, in which case you're just changing from attacking to having a discussion. I think that's the major consideration when you loop that into it. You don't want to attack people, because then the message of hate is not stopped. They still have their platform and they continue to speak. But you know, if you have a discussion and you leave it for everyone out there to see, people learn. Like, I know it's hard and it's very difficult to just take all lives matter to the chest. Like it really exhausts you. But when you put in that work of working with people, right, that discussion, that's how change is made. Because attacking people isn't going to get anything done.
Right. And I want to just add, don't waste all your time trying to proselytize. Like, put in the work. You know what I'm saying?
What does that mean?
Don't waste all your time trying to win your white brothers and sisters. At some point, put in the work. Right? Because a part of the movement isn't just making sure white people understand, it's actually changing policy, right? It's actually getting things done. And a part of that doesn't necessarily have to be educating our white brothers and sisters. Now, some of them will. I'm talking about those who are reluctant, who are staunch in their positioning. You know, I don't think you should, like I said, proselytize or try to be the prosecutor or the defense attorney all the time. Put in the work. Don't let that deter from the movement. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and to add on to that, like specifically, for the allies who are feeling, the guilt, understanding that that's sort of just a small piece of what, Black Americans have been feeling. When you're, a little girl, right, at the age of, as early as 3, 4, and you experience your first act of racism, and then your parents tell you, suck it up, buttercup, because you're going to be dealing with it for the rest of your life, and there's nothing we can do. And that really, really hurts. So I think for allies who really do want to move forward and really do want to help, and maybe they're thinking about how to get past that, think about that, right? Like, it hurts, but we've been dealing with it for a long time, So, you just have to move past that. Like, if you really want to be an ally and you really do want to help, like, your emotions are still valid. Because, yeah, I think it does suck to be told that you have this privilege that you didn't ask for, because they didn't ask for it, right? But now it's up to you to take those emotions and do something with it, right? Turn that guilt into anger towards our racist society, right? That put you in that position, right? It put them in a position and it put us in a position, but we need to work together, right? Even though we're at different ends of it, right? We're still all, I guess I would say, victims of America's racism, right?
Yeah. And
I like
just,
that. Love that.
Yeah. And just to add on to it, like even your question said, why is it a necessity? I would reframe the question, because it's not a necessity, to be honest with you. It's actually a luxury. Me having my brother Joey on here is a blessing to us to engage on another level. Do you understand what I'm saying? Than we've had before. But I kind of trigger my ancestors, like Malcolm, that said, by any means necessary. You know what I'm saying? Whether with or without, we're going to get some stuff done. So that's kind of where I'm at with my positioning here.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I then want to ask you guys now, what are things that we're seeing a lot of people repost, we're seeing a lot of black boxes on our Instagram, we're seeing a lot of hashtags, but what are like concrete things that other minorities who are not black and white people can do, right? And what are things to do and what not to do also?
Can we do one each?
Petitions.
I agree.
It's the easiest free way to contribute, whether it's on whitehouse.gov or change.org. Yeah. And spreading awareness for those like myself who like to post on social media to bring awareness to certain issues. If it is actionable, it is so much more helpful to the people around you. That's why, again, petitions are powerful, calling is powerful, and then, reading up, doing the work, and all the time. I know it sounds like a lot, but there are a lot of ways to go about it. But the easiest stuff is the petitions, in my personal opinion. Beyond that, learn, unlearn every day, and just for allies especially, recognize that, yeah, we are privileged in the sense that we don't experience this stuff as directly, and sometimes you can turn it off and walk away, but get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You'll be shocked at what that does, not only for you within this specific movement, but in your entire life. But yeah, no, seriously, sign petitions, educate yourself, amplify a whole lot of Black academics. This is the book that I'm reading for the first time right now, so I'm really excited to be about that. But like, it's not like it's a prop. Like we got to do the work, and you got to continue to do the work even when it's not on your social media.
Exactly.
I'd like to just add on one minor thing to Joey's. For change.org, do not donate to the.
Do not. Yeah.
For this specific question that we're on, can we have everybody just go around? I like Jill's idea to just say like 1 or 2 things, just so that we can use our time wisely.
Okay. I guess I'll start. On the macro level, I know people are going to despise me for saying this, but vote, please. And how about you just go vote? I don't care if you don't like Biden or Kamala. Go vote, please. Thank you. On a micro level, many people love the movements and things of that nature, which are great. Going on the street is great, but get involved in your local politics. Get involved in your city hall, town hall meetings. Know who your city council members are. Know who your mayor is. Know who your chief of police, who they are, and begin to find areas within your own community that you can begin to make a change and make a difference. Whether it be just having kids over and having a study group, or just different things of that nature. Begin to find hotspots in your community where you can make a difference.
I would say I have a couple. Just don't put this on Black people. Do not put extra effort. Do not come to them with your problems, with your guilt. The whole point of this is to amplify Black voices. However, you don't want to put more of the work on them. You don't want to ask your friend like, hey, yo, what's this? Like, try to figure things out yourself. And a great way to do that is to start by watching the film 13th if you have Netflix. I think it might even be free by Netflix. I think they like offer it for free.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a great scope of the land to get you started. And then from there, you can just jump off.
I was going to say to individualize, and sort of personalize your impact. Look at, your career and your specialties, right? If you're currently in a career or going into a career, whatever you're studying, think about ways you can make impact in that realm, right? In that career field, or through that career. Like for me, psychology is, at home for me, and that's where I'm focusing, right? Arlene knows. So you don't necessarily have to do other things. And yes, I think you should assist and bring attention to that. But, don't stretch yourself too thin, because it's impossible to do everything. But what are you good at, right? What are you into? And then make your change through that, because I think it's going to be a lot more powerful. And it's also just going to be, I don't want to say a lot easier, but just a lot more feasible, right? Because for someone who doesn't know about something, it's going to be almost impossible for you to learn everything about it. So keep it close to home.
Most definitely. I'll echo that sentiment with a little bit of a twist for me. Because right now I'm in the middle of a job search, right? I mean, the pandemic kind of shut my thing down, but when looking for a job, I've been doing research into where I've been working and where I want to be working. And it led me to this conclusion: don't siphon this away into this is the Black Lives Matter movement. Apply it to all of your life. Use that as part of the paradigm and the lens in which you view the world. Because there are companies out there that'll have like, oh yes, we support BLM, but what are they doing for it? Or then there are hit pieces written by former employees about why the culture is not good. And to that, like where you're consuming, who are you buying from? What are you buying from them? Is the place that you're buying from friendly to Black employees and to Black customers? Like, if you can start to think about it in a holistic sense with your life, yeah, it's hard. It can be exhausting. But for allies especially, understand this is something that Black individuals experience all the time. And it is uncomfortable. It's not fun, but it's work that has to be done. So just make sure you keep it as a paradigm for your whole life. Don't silo it or siphon it away. It is all encompassing, and it's not like Black Lives Matter turns off when you go to bed. It's not like it turns off when you're off social media. It's all the time.
I would like to say be wary of kind of tone deafness. Like I know a lot of people I've been reading a lot of posts on these issues and stuff like that, and a lot of people are just like, well, I don't have white privilege because this happened in my life, or this can't be a certain issue because I've never seen it before, and I have a bunch of Black friends or whatever. So it's kind of like not necessarily talking over Black people and their experiences just because you haven't seen it or you haven't experienced it. Also, like, just try to keep an open mind on different issues.
I think that's a perfect way to end this. My last question for you guys in our last 4-5 minutes is, how can you stay motivated with all that's going on? And, as a Black person and as a non-Black person, I feel like this is very tiring. I myself had to shut down social media sometimes because I just get depressed. I'm just like, wow, like this is a lot to take in, and we're fighting this like every millisecond, So, what are ways that you guys stay motivated, or that you guys advise other people to stay motivated in this lifelong journey?
I want to really just re-emphasize, doing it in what you love. I like psych, so doing my psych research on this topic for me is, I love it. Like, I like doing it, and it does get tiring, but I feel like that's just a lot less tiring for me than Like, I can't even think of a good example, but, doing something you love because you already love it, you're already doing it, right? If you're an artist, do art on a topic, right? Like, you don't have to do all these other things necessarily. You can make a big impact through your art, for example. So I think when you try and do other things, I think you drain yourself out a lot easier because you're learning something new on top of taking on all the emotional stress of dealing with racism, right? So I think, just like I said, keeping it close to home and doing it through things that you love doing.
Yeah, I would say get spiritual. Many people know, I'm a believer in Jesus. I think that's one of my main motivators right now, is pressing into my faith, and whatever faith that is for anyone, just that spiritual knowing that, our ancestors overcame so much back then. And I believe we will continue to. So just pressing in to whatever spiritual faith or whatever kind that you have, I think that is a source of motivation. Even like Courtney was saying with the arts and things you love, that can cause a spiritual power. Doing what you love and that passion, that drive, that, civil rights leaders called it a soul force. John Lewis, just referring to him, he called it a soul force, that passion to know that we're not doing this in vain. This is not for naught. I'm setting up an inheritance for my children's children, and that's an inheritance of freedom.
I'm gonna read this out loud. So Gio says something along the lines of white people are thriving. My question is, what about the white people who are low to low middle income, who struggle to make ends meet and aren't thriving, who look at the arguments calling attention to Black lives and white privilege and say that they don't have advantages, who say that they struggle and don't feel like they have privilege? That's a large group of opposition. What do you say to them? Good question.
So I'll actually start off on a little funny note. Theo Vaughn is a comedian, and he grew up very poor, but one of his famous lines, he's a white dude, growing up, he's like, yeah, I knew some guys with white privilege. I knew some guys with sweaters, because at a certain level, it's not as visible, right? But the issues that face them are very different, right? So like when you talk about, especially from my personal experience, going to rural Appalachia, right? Where it's just, there's no investment. The land is barren. There are food deserts as a result of the one highway that winds around the Appalachian Mountains that takes you to a grocery store that's 25 miles away. And then all they have is fast food. These are very different struggles, and they are struggles nonetheless, but it is not because of your whiteness, which is the big thing. That's the only thing I can say is, yes, those are very real struggles, and these struggles are yours, and we acknowledge that, and we should help. But at the same time, that doesn't take away. When you're struggling, don't hate on someone else who is struggling. Recognize that you're both struggling, and work needs to be done in both verticals. It's not versus. It's to quote Avery, when the tide rises, all the boats should rise. Yeah. And if those boats are not rising, then work needs to be done on both sides.
Yeah. I was going to say that when we look at white privilege, we look at it not from a lens of the advantages we can get presently. There is an advantage of white privilege historically. Historically, in this country, you did not have to endure over 400 years of oppression. And although your current condition, whoever may answer this question, although the person's current condition may be impoverished, they do not have on their back or in their lineage 400 years of a back start. They actually have a head start due to the color of their skin. And so I would just put that lens on that answer on, my economic status isn't great, but socially, your social status due to history is better and far better than the African American.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize what both of you have just said, right? It's not because of your race, right? It's not your whiteness that is leading to the issues that these people are facing, right? You're talking about class, and class is a whole nother issue, right? But then when you look, but when we say white privilege, we're not talking about class. Right. We're talking about whiteness, right? And with whiteness and white privilege, that there is a strong association then with class. But I think people get the two mixed up. So when we talk about white privilege, we're not talking about classism alone, right? We're talking about whiteness, and we're talking about racism, and that does go hand in hand with it. So I think to people that say that, keep that in mind. So now when you look at a poor Black individual, right, you're looking at something different. When you're looking at a poor Black trans individual, you're looking at something different. When you look at a poor cisgender female, right, you're looking at something different. So when you add those other identities, you're getting a lot of different systems at play that create a lot of different systems of oppression. But when you're white, you're only looking at your class, right? And then, if you have some of those other marginalized identities, those too. Yeah.
Any last thoughts, Ray? Close us out.
Well, no, it's essentially all three just said everything I was already thinking. It's just the difference between like your race disparities and class disparities. Most Black people have issues, like there's only 8% of white people in poverty versus 22% of Black people. So like I feel like even then it's a bigger issue with Black people in class disparities and versus white people in class disparities and issues like that. But yeah, everyone else already said basically everything.
It's okay. You brought out the facts. That's what we like to. We like it all. So to close us out, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Jill had to leave today a little bit earlier. And give a special shout out to my panelists. They were all intellectual. They're all college, almost graduate or graduate students. For sharing, your personal experience and your thoughts, and everything else in between. So this is our last episode for this series, but more episodes will be coming this fall, 2020, with a combination from Tumbao and LTAs. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel and our Instagram on tumbao.lu. Thank you guys for being here. So I guess that's it. All right, I'll see you all later.
Thank you, Arlene.
Thank you.
Yes.